Hello, this is day 93 of reading one canto of the Divine Comedy every single day. We are on Paradiso, Canto 26, which I'll read from the Longfellow translation before giving some quick comments. While I was doubting, for my vision quenched, out of the flame refulgent that had quenched it issued a breathing that attentive made me, saying, While thou recoverest the sense of seeing which in me thou hast consumed, 'tis well that speaking thou shouldst compensate it. Begin, then, and declare to what thy soul is aimed, and count it for a certainty. Sight is in thee bewildered and not dead, because the lady, who through this divine region conducteth thee, has in her look the power the hand of Ananias had. I said, As pleaseth her, or soon or late, let the cure come to eyes that portals were, when she with fire I ever burn with entered. The good that gives contentment to this court, the Alpha and Omega, is of all the writing that love reads me low or loud. The selfsame voice that taken had from me the terror of the sudden dazzlement, to speak still farther put it in my thought, and said, In verity, with finer sieve behoveth thee to sift. Thee it behoveth to say who aimed thy bow at such a target. And I, by philosophic arguments, and by authority that hence descends, such love must needs imprint itself in me. For good, so far as good, when comprehended, doth straight enkindle love, and so much greater as more of goodness in itself it holds, than to that essence whose is such advantage that every good which out of it is found is nothing but a ray of its own light, more than else whither must the mind be moved of every one, in loving, who discerns the truth in which this evidence is founded. Such truth he to my intellect reveals who demonstrates to me the primal love of all the sempiternal substances. The voice reveals it of the truthful author, who says to Moses, speaking of himself, I will make all my goodness pass before thee. Thou too revealest it to me, beginning the loud evangelist that proclaims the secret of heaven to earth above all other edict. And I heard say, by human intellect, and by authority concordant with it, of all thy loves reserve for God the highest. But say again, if other chords thou feelest, draw thee towards him, that thou mayest proclaim with how many teeth this love is biting thee. The holy purpose of the eagle of Christ not latent was, nay, rather I perceived whither he fain would my profession lead. Therefore I recommenced, all of those bites which have the power to turn the heart to God unto my charity have been concurrent. The being of the world, and my own being, the death which he endured that I may live, and that which all the faithful hope, as I do, with the forementioned vivid consciousness have drawn me from the sea of love perverse, and of the right have placed me on the shore. The leaves, wherewith embowered is all the garden of the eternal gardener, do I love as much as he has granted them of good. As soon as I had ceased, a song most sweet throughout the heaven resounded, and my lady said with the others, Holy, holy, holy. And as at some keen light one wakes from sleep, by reason of the visual spirit that runs unto the splendor passed from coat to coat, and he who wakes abhorreth what he sees, so all unconscious in his sudden waking, until the judgment cometh to his aid, so from before mine eyes did Beatrice chase every mote with radiance of her own, that cast its light 1,000 miles and more. Whence better after than before I saw, and in a kind of wonderment I asked about a fourth light that I saw with us. And said my lady, There within those rays gazes upon its maker the first soul that ever the first virtue did create. Even as the bough that downward bends its top at transit of the wind, and then is lifted by its own virtue, which inclines it upward, likewise did I, and while that she was speaking, being amazed, and then I was made bold by a desire to speak wherewith I burned. And I began, O apple, that mature alone hast been produced, O ancient father, to whom each wife is daughter and daughter-in-law, devoutly as I can, I supplicate thee that thou wouldst speak to me. Thou seest my wish, and I to hear thee quickly speak it not. Sometimes an animal, when covered, struggles, so that his impulse needs must be apparent, by reason of the rapage following it. And in like manner the primeval soul made clear to me athwart its covering how jubilant it was to give me pleasure. Then breathed, Without thy uttering it to me, thine inclination better I discern than thou, whatever thing is surest to thee. For I behold it in the truthful mirror, that of himself all things parhelion makes, and none makes him parhelion of itself. Thou fain wouldst hear how long ago God placed me within the lofty garden, where this lady unto so long a stairway thee disposed, and how long to mine eyes it was a pleasure, and of the great disdain the proper cause, and the language that I used and that I made. Now, son of mine, the tasting of the tree not in itself was cause of so great exile, but solely the overstepping of the bounds. There, whence thy lady moved Virgilius, 4,302 circuits made by the sun, this counsel I desired. And him I saw return to all the lights of his highway 900 times and 30, whilst I upon the earth was tarrying. The language that I spake was quite extinct before that in the work interminable the people under Nimrod were employed. For nevermore result of reasoning, because of human pleasure that doth change, obedient to the heavens, was durable. A natural action is it that man speaks, but whether thus or thus doth nature leave to your own art, as seemeth best to you. Ere I descended to the infernal anguish, El was on earth the name of the chief good, from whom comes all the joy that wraps me round. Eli he then was called, and that is proper, because the use of men is like a leaf on bough, which goeth and another cometh. Upon the mount that highest over the wave rises was I, in life, or pure or sinful, from the first hour to that which is the second, as the sun changes quadrant to the sixth. While Dante is blind, St. John decides to begin his examination of Dante, promising him that Beatrice herself has the power to restore his sight, and will do so in just a minute. Love is blind, right? Surprisingly, St. John doesn't ask, what is love? Instead, he asks, what is your soul searching for? Remember what Virgil said about love towards the end of the Purgatorio, that love occurs when there's an inclination towards something that is good. Dante replies that he seeks the good, the highest goods, and that it is love, whether loudly or softly, that guides him to it. He's saying that both as a love poet as well as a human who loves the good that he sees. Love is a gateway, is a path to the good, as well as a perfect response to it. For as he says, good perceived as good enkindles love. And furthermore, love gives knowledge of the good. The more you know something, the more you love it for the good that you see in it. The more that you love it, the more you want to know more about it, and the process rinses and repeats. But Dante also says that he understands that God is the source of all of the goods that he could possibly find. And so St. John asks, okay, great, I'm glad that you love God most of all, but are there other loves that also draw you to him? Now, we know how we would answer for Dante. We would say, oh yes, my love of poetry, my love of love that I then write poetry about, my love for Beatrice, my love for Florence and for justice. He would say all of these things. He's like, yes, all of these can also lead me to God. But that's not what he says. He goes even further. The being of the world and my own being. The death, Jesus died so that my soul might live, the hope of all the faithful and mine too, joined with the living truth mentioned before, from that deep sea of false love rescued me and set me on the right shore of true love. I love each leaf, with which enleaved is all the garden of the eternal gardener, in measure of the light he sheds on each. With the caveat that he was rescued from loving things falsely, or loving things that should not be loved, or loving things for the wrong reasons, and set on the shore, he says, of true love, then says, I love every single leaf of creation, every person, basically the entire world. Every part of it declares to him God. It all leads him to God. This is truly a very beautiful idea once you get your head around it. The idea that you can contemplate God. You can somehow get to the highest good through contemplation of any of the smaller goods that reflect him. Whether that's nature, whether that's another person, whether that's many people, whether that's institutions. I'm just going to keep going up Plato's ladder of love there. You can find God through any of the beautiful things that he made. You can, will you? I don't know. But Dante says that he does. Then heaven congratulates him for his correct answer, and his sight is restored, and he finds that he can see better than before. Whether that's because of Beatrice's healing powers or because his examination is complete and his soul is prepared, could be either. But once he can see again, he sees that a fourth soul has come to join them. And Beatrice says, "This is Adam," as in Adam and Eve. And Dante has some questions for him. He wants to know how long ago he lived, how long he was in the garden before he fell, and so on and so forth. But also he wants to know what language Adam spoke. Remember, Dante's a poet. Italian was considered a vulgar, a lower class language at this time, and yet he chose to master it such that he could write the Divine Comedy in it so that all the common people could read it. Language is important to him for more than one reason. And Adam just kind of brushes that aside. He says, well, the language that I spoke didn't even exist by the time of the Tower of Babel, not too long after. So who cares? He says, yeah, everybody talks, but how you talk? Leave that to your own choice. Doesn't really matter. Some people think that this is a self-critique of Dante's for himself, for the limits of the use of his poetry to affect change and to apprehend beauty and goodness. But I think it might have something more to do with the context of his use of the Italian language for this poem. Like I said, it was not really acceptable to do any kind of high art in Italian at this time. He was kind of the first one that did it. So you have Adam within this poem saying to the reader, yeah, it doesn't really matter how you speak, just speak. Perhaps he anticipates the criticism. Adam clarifies for Dante that it was not eating the fruit that was his sin, but simply overstepping the boundary that God had set. That was the sin. He also says that from when he was first created to when he sinned, I can't really tell what he means by this. It says, from the first hour to that which is the second, as the sun changes quadrant to the sixth. It really depends what as the sun changes quadrant means, but if I'm reading it right, it could have been as little as 6 hours, which for how long that is, it might as well have been about 10 minutes. But 6 hours was also the amount of time, if I'm recalling correctly, that Jesus was on the cross for. So I wonder if that's meant to be a relation there. Who knows? If you know what the sun changing quadrant means, let us know down in the comments. That's all for today, though. I'll see you tomorrow.